So I'm coming up here to talk about AI from a manufacturer's perspective. We've been really focused on sort of an industry's perspective, things that we need to do as a community, some of the challenges, some of the sort of what's happening in the background. But wanted to kind of highlight where we're approaching it from a manufacturer's perspective. And also kind of, making sure people don't forget that, Evertz is in this space. We're predominantly known as a hardware vendor, but we are participating a fair amount in development of tools that help the industry create content, distribute content, and everything else. So AI has definitely been something that's been on our radar, more machine learning than anything else, for the last 5 or 6 years, just that we're looking, it's ways to, how do we leverage that data? How do we use that data to make storytelling more efficient? How do we operate our facilities more efficiently? And how do we really personalize content to the end user? So I'm kind of breaking it down into a couple of different aspects and really sort of looking at where we have sort of positioned our technology, where we've seen advantages, and we've heard that throughout the day, even yesterday, in terms of where we can benefit, where things can benefit from leveraging these models. We'll talk about 3 sort of areas, and then I'll talk about the concerns. And again, most of the concerns are very similar to what we've heard thus far. I mean, again, as a manufacturer, we have to be quite aware of the concerns and raise that and participate in conversations of making sure that as an industry we're working and marching forward. And again, a lot of the topics that were talked about just prior to this really resonate with us. So from a content creation perspective, this is something that's, been happening. And again, a lot of this is really framed around a conversation that Phil Weiser had on one of the NAB articles recently in May. And he talked about how they leverage it. And again, for us as a manufacturer, we take a lot of our lead from not only technology that's available, but also necessity, as Bernard talked about, from our customers. So for their perspective, they looked at, AI is predominantly through production, and this is where they're going to be concerned with and where they focus is right now. How do they create that content, especially with the challenges we have today, where content is being consumed in so many different ways, and those ways are changing rapidly. So as an industry, we've got to be able to adapt to that. And we've seen that with adaptation of IP to give us that flexibility. We've seen that through the adaptation of cloud, but tools like AI also accelerate that ability to create content and deliver content forward, right? And be able to address the changes. And our customers are feeling that pain, again, looking at ways to monetize content, stay in business with that content. So how do they use it? How do they leverage that? So there are tools today. We've seen a lot of them. We've talked, yesterday was a great example of some of the things we saw in the audio space. Today we've got a couple of great tools. I was participating on a panel in January with a few different people that were in the creative side. Again, a lot of it is almost post side. So for example, at the far left there, we've got we've got Adobe Firefly AI, something they built into their tool set that help sort of create images or sort of create the context or expand images. So one of the images that we saw yesterday, Terry had his cat in a 4x3, and then some of the things he saw at NEB allowed him to sort of expand that image in 16:9. So the effort to do that is extremely now is sort of eliminated by having something like Adobe Firefly. I'm going to show what the Olympic IOC published just recently to kind of show another thing that they've done. I'll go to that video in a sec. But for example, metadata, that was a conversation that was part of the panel in terms of how do we look at archives? How do we go through that? How do we generate that language, that data that is necessary to help us in the creation and promotion of content? Companies like Agoli, Veritone, Excel, AIs are companies that have been around, that are small companies that have sort of focused on taking computer vision and AI tools to go through archival content, identify, mark them up with metadata that I can then use throughout the process, right? Leveraging that data, building that data set. Opus is a company that's relatively new, but again, they look at it from the content distribution. How do I take that long form content and derive multiple versions quickly for TikTok, Instagram, all those different platforms in which content is being consumed? How do I do that fairly quickly? So you're starting to see different aspects in which they're leveraging that to really amplify the stories we're telling, but doing it in a more efficient way, okay? So I'm gonna quickly step back here. If we can just switch over to the main screen for a second while I get the video here. Yep. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and play this.
Before, the center of the world in art, music, fashion, and sophistication. After the traumas of the Great War, Parisians are enjoying life like never before. Paris looks stunning in black and white, but even better in color. On the 5th of July 1924, bringing even more glamour and glitz to the city, the Olympic Games arrive. Gaston Doumergue, the President of France, opens the Games.
Je proclame l'ouverture des Jeux Olympiques de Paris.
France's finest, 401 men and women, enter the Stade de Colombe. They are a fine sight. But courtesy of AI cloud technology, look at them in color. Britain sends a team of 267.
So
The US team.
Going to go back to that. So that's an example of, one of the big things they highlighted just a month ago at one of the IOC media technology presentations, working with Alibaba. They basically had taken the archive content they would have from the 1924 Olympics in preparation for the Olympic Games that are happening in a month, colorized every frame of video and be able to present that. And they took a fraction of the time that it would have done if they had done it the traditional way of looking at every individual frame and be able to do that. So this is where tools, again, that we are developing here help enable us to create that content, revive that archival content, and leverage it in more meaningful and new ways, right? So this is just another great example of where these tools are already existing, but how they can really accelerate our creation, our storytelling capabilities. All right. So for us, again, it is about how do we leverage this in our own tool sets and things like that. For us, it's about how do we enable our customers to tell stories more efficiently, more effectively. And again, for us, it's developing product that are going to be in around that, but also leveraging the new tool sets to create those stories. So when we talk about something like this particular product, and I'll just use it as an example, but highlighting some of the key elements we've added to this, is about taking information, taking remote locations and bringing it into a sort of a new way of doing production, live production, keeping it sort of ability to tell more stories from that singular event. So in this case, it's something called Bravo Studio. It's a virtual live production suite, and again, allows us to sort of redefine how we approach storytelling, but then also enable AI tools to accelerate that even further. So in this case, you do all the various facets within a production environment. So you're going to do this live A/B switching, you're going to do all the recording. But inherently, we've also adapted a number of different co-pilots that allows us to really take advantage of elements and sort of techniques, computer vision, the data that comes in, and those other pieces to really sort of accelerate and amplify the way we tell those stories with this tool. So going to skip through here and just get to one of them. So one of them is leveraging the data that's there. And we talked about that briefly in the conversation we just had. It's about taking the information that's available, right? So now metadata, that data becomes a critical part of any sort of co-pilot that we use to really automate or generate new content with. So things like Genius Sports, Sports Radar, Stats Perform, these are data points that already exist. So leveraging the ability to take that information and assign it to the video that we're consuming so I can then leverage that to create automatic highlights and a few other things. But TriCap, for example, is an optical technique. So I'm monitoring the movement of the players, movement of the ball. So leverage that data, getting the X, Y, Z combinations, and using that information to do more information. And we talked about taking information from the camera, from the lens. These are all metadata components or elements that we should start to bring into the production, assign that to the metadata, or assign that to all the individual frames that are coming in, and then really take advantage of that. So here's an example of this, okay? So essentially what we're doing with the virtual camera co-pilot is an example where I take a fixed 8K or 4K camera position, and then I take the data I'm collecting from the game feed, whether it's the TriCap data or any other information, or even probes or devices that are in a player's jersey, in a basketball or something like that, and basically use that to create virtual cameras and drive that in real time. So from a singular fixed position, I'm able to capture multiple players or multiple sort of cameras and leverage that into my production to tell various different stories. So here's an example. So in this case, we're looking at it, one camera sitting at the top here, and this is an 8K camera, and we're just going to do a central wide. Okay, so we're just going to look at it wide, get the full game, everything's there. Well, let's identify a tag. Let's just follow the ball. Have my camera do the cutout, just follow the ball. All right, so again, this is a virtual camera that's been created from that single one point, but now I'm leveraging the real-time data that's coming in to derive that real video that's following the ball. Let's find a particular player. Let's follow Devion Mitchell, okay? So let's just follow him, have a particular player camera. Again, keeping it in focus, keeping it in frame, but then just following that particular player, generating a Devion Mitchell camera just from that full 8K. How about having let's look at another player. Let's even see what Matthew Myers is doing. He's another player we're gonna track, great, he's gonna do that. Well, let's put both of these guys into frame and follow the combination of the two, right? So let's go back, let's highlight Devion and let's highlight Matthew, and let's go ahead and say we want to have both of these players and keep them both in focus because there was a great little combination there. So this is an example where we're doing this in real time. You're pulling the information that's being captured or presented through various data points, and you're able to derive these virtual cameras and leverage sort of different points of view into the production. Thank you. I give credit all to the engineers. I just present the stuff. So this is even taken even further here, right? So Highlight Factory is really about, we talked about creating content quickly. And there was also the aspects, I know Rono talked about it in the presentation here, is like taking aspects of assembling those pieces together and presenting that. So again, leveraging that real-time metadata that comes in from all the various camera angles. So again, this is in the live production. So this is not post-production where I'm taking the final product and I'm analyzing it. I'm analyzing it from every camera angle that we've got, assigning the metadata to every camera angle that you've got. And then what we're doing here is we're taking that information, we're assigning that video, assigning the metadata onto every frame of video that comes in, and then using that information to derive highlights. So, and highlights from a perspective of full packages with the intro, the different dissolves, different actions in it, and being able to publish that, making it available to the director to take to air. Not do it automatically, but give them an option about curating that content, right? As you know, the action happens so quickly that sometimes you're missing a story. So the ability to quickly generate that and bring that to life and bring that to air is essential. So I'm gonna go ahead and run this, and this basically also leverages some of the things we did with Microsoft, and it's also the large language modeling where it's done by natural voice, right? So we saw an example of that with Bo's presentation earlier in terms of running a production by calling out the different cameras, but here's another approach to it as well. So I'm gonna run, sorry, before I do that, I'm just gonna give you a bit of idea of the back end here. So in this case, we've got the user interfacing with Bravo. They access that through a mic. They take those instructions, they translate that text, that information, that conversation you have in a production, and they derive information that we leverage to generate that highlight package, right? So it's something we demonstrated and highlighted IBC with Microsoft on their booth. So I'm gonna run this demo. This is one of our guys describing what's actually happening here.
All right, so we got, let's see, we have Pittsburgh and Florida State here. Pittsburgh's in white, Florida State's in red or in maroon, but we'll just call it red. That's what they would say in production. I'm using those terms because that's actually how they would speak quickly in a production. They don't always use the team name. A lot of times they'll just say white, red, et cetera, et cetera. And they'll use numbers, not players' names a lot of times as well. So here we go for a demo. So let's just start by saying, let's just look, number 2 maybe on Pittsburgh is having a decent game. Let's see, that's a game story that we want to highlight here. So I'm going to ask for something. Shots made by number 2 white. So you'll see at the bottom of the screen, it actually even displays the annotation. And then right away, up here in this area under highlight package, is this proposed package that came from the now large language model enabled Highlight Factory. So I've queued that up on preview there, and I'm going to run it in a second. And we can actually see that there's a number of angles here that have been added. So let's go back and let's roll it. And then out comes on program is this game story. This game story around number 2 on white and the shots that that player has made. Right, here's a good shot here too. I think this is actually McGowan's is his name. And so it's just now a series of his highlights. Okay, and you can always push through, and you always have the option. Actually, I think I got all shots made. Is what I got here. But anyway, and then you can always roll off anytime you want and go back to your program if you like.
So that's just an example there of how we can accelerate the production, right? So in this case, you would have a number of operators sort of generating those different stories, but here the TD or the director can simply say, just give me all the shots. Or post-match, take that event, condense it into 20 minutes, condense it into a 2-minute, right? So these are all actions that are now just triggered by either your voice through the large language models or through text interfaces and such. But it's about creating more stories, right? So it's taking the sort of mundane tasks of just trying to assemble those different pieces, leveraging the data, and leveraging the sort of the power of AI and some of the machine learning abilities to generate those packages. But the key point here is that we're recommending these packages. These are not packages that are automatically going on air. These are not elements we're just going to say, take it there. It's giving you options, curating options to enhance that story, right? And that's really what we're looking for, is options to do that. And that's really where these tools become very powerful. It's about really enhancing the ability to tell that story, be very creative, right? And then it goes back to the quote that I believe Anthony had in the beginning, yesterday, which was, again, let me do my art. Don't worry about the other stuff in terms of the mundane stuff. Give me the ability and the tools and stuff. So Highlight Factory is a great example of that from a content creation perspective. Another one that we've also looked at and we've sort of implemented is the ability to derive multi-phase cameras from a single phase. So again, enhancing that story ability, right? So, we know that there's a number of, tools out there for the very large scale productions, for the Olympics coming up, or even for the Euro coming up, we're going to see great deal of production with super slow-mo and all those other things. But not every production can afford that. So how do we leverage technology again to derive those features that I can enhance my story or my product that's going out to air? So again, this is an example where we've taken a single phase camera and we're deriving in real time multi-phase derivatives of it. So in this case, I got a single phase camera. I can derive a 2-phase, 4-phase from it. And again, this is from the production side, the production angles, right? So, may not have I may not have a camera, a super slow in the right spot, but I can derive a super slow action in this case. So this is the main camera, but even behind for this dunk, right? So from behind the bench type of thing, deriving a super slow-mo dunk there, or even a block coming up here. I believe we have another block, yeah. So again, enhancing the story, right? So these elements or tools that we're adding to that production to create that very powerful story. So from a content side of things, or the content creation, we also then get into the content personalization, right? This is really where, from an industry's perspective, this is where the challenge becomes, it's really where everyone is now. How do I keep an audience attention? How do I give them the ability to really pick and choose the story they want, or that experience, right? Define that unique experience. So in this case, again, what they're looking for example, at Paramount is, we're looking at derivative works, trying to cut down and create images or create content that we can cut up and deliver and really distribute that out to various platforms, various experiences. So here's an example where I'm on a user interface, on a mobile device. Okay, so we have a piece of technology that creates an interactive overlay on top of that. So I can turn on stats, I can do participation in polls. But in this case, now I'm going to use this as my window directly into the production to pull in content directly to me that I'm interested in. Okay, so in this case, I'm watching a baseball game, and in fact, we've got the baseball game going on here. I'm like, oh, it's the 5th inning. Let me go, catch me up. So now I've opened up this opportunity.
This first
reached
inning.
in to the production to generate
The
the
colors
catch
to
me up
Harper.
package.
It's
So that highlight
down.
factory.
Right center
I'm
field.
now at the bottom.
Lightning strikes.
Caught myself up. I've created that
Fouls.
package to catch me up and bring me to where we are in that game event. Okay? So again, this is where we're starting to now push, having the ability in the back end to create this content very quickly. I can now really push it to the end user immediately and give them that power to create the story they want to watch and they want to see.
Suarez fires. Maldonado
So again, this is an example of what we do here in terms of how we can leverage the content creation, but also now use it to personalize it. I can select a particular player I'm interested in, all the different actions they're doing, again, in the production side of things, right? So in real time, not post-match, not post-event. So the other area where, you know, again, from a company that delivers a lot of infrastructure or product that fits into connecting the cameras to the screen, again, we see opportunities here where we can leverage these tools. As we've moved from traditional SDI, where facilities, when I started in 2005, the largest facility I saw was a 256 by 256 SDI router. That is small potatoes compared to what's out there today. Right? When we look at some of the facilities that some of these large media companies are building, they're building hundreds of thousands of flows running over 2110 infrastructure, which adds to the level of complexity of maintaining and managing this, right? And again, this is where the customers are realizing that they need to have powerful tools to help manage, maintain, monitor what's going on in the facilities. Again, we're also going through that phase where finding skilled talent to do that. Understanding video is becoming a harder and harder challenge, right? So we need to be able to build these tools, be able to identify what's happening very quickly. So one of the things that we've built on, so we've had something called Magnum OS for a while. Essentially, what we've done is we added a couple other elements over the last 5 or 6 years. One of them was something called Insight that pulled in real-time analytics and data from the system. So Magnum was basically your broadcast controller. I execute a command, it makes the route, everything's happy. But what Insight is doing is in real time capturing every action that's happening, all the information from all the devices in that system. So it's building a rich data set of what's going on. So I wanted something like this to happen, did it actually happen? And do the compare and start to identify issues. So this is where we started to add in something called deep learning anomaly detection, right? So we're starting to take that information that's happening, and when we detect anomaly, it's just start to stitch together, present to the engineering staff, the operational staff, the identification of where the issue is, and then present that in a natural language so that they can actually identify and resolve that quickly. So get rid of the noise, get rid of some of the Christmas tree type of effects, and give them the information right away and present that. So leveraging what's going on, what your intents are, and everything else. So you start to build an understanding of your facility on the data that you're collecting, and then you're able to now build what normal should be, and then start to find out where the anomalies are happening and how to identify those and resolve those before they show up on air or everything else. So this is just some examples where we've seen that, and again, you know, we've gone through that, we've seen some series of anomalies, but we end up translating that to something that's a readable text, a readable information. So we're able to now take those large language models and sort of present that in a very meaningful way to identify what the problem is and resolve it quicker. Okay. Another example is machine learning by assertion. So one of the things that we launched a while ago, which was a company called Evertile, was a ability to present technology where we're actually providing the services to our end customers. But for us to be able to do that, we needed to ensure that we were providing a trustworthy service, building that trust, right? Something we talked about yesterday, something we talked about earlier today is trust. So, you know, one of the things is we leveraged some information where we said, okay, we're broadcasting your content, we've got a schedule that's going through. Let's make sure what we're supposed to go out is in fact happening. Do a compare. And if it says I'm running this particular commercial, by visually analyzing what the commercial or what we played out compared to what was supposed to be there, to actually happen. So we're doing an audit of what's going on, what was supposed to be played out, and auditing that back, so we're able to provide a 5-9 service to our customers from a perspective of playout and such. So it's not just looking at a particular playout schedule, it's actually looking at the content inside that playout schedule, comparing that what's going out, making those elements happening. So these are tools that really accelerate our ability to consistently deliver content with a very high level of reliability and high level of quality and high level of integrity there as well. These are just examples of some of the incident reports. Again, just presenting that to the end user, letting them know that there's concerns about what's coming up. But we've been analyzing what's supposed to be played out, what's coming out, what went out, and presenting that information as well. So from a perspective of considerations, I mean, from a vendor perspective, what we've been talking about over the last day and a half is true for us as well, right? It's about addressing what the concerns were. As I mentioned, I participated in a panel in January with a number of content creators. And again, this was just after the big influx of information about AI and you know, how they're going to replace everyone's jobs and the big concerns, right? So, you know, it's one of those elements is understanding that these are going to be tools that we use. We have to be careful how we use these tools. We got to be very aware that these are tools. There will be, you know, opportunities where we can look for, I think what was the term you used, Anthony, was an efficiency. What was the there was a term someone mentioned, efficiency modeling, or somewhere you're making those mundane tasks more efficient by leveraging these tools. So there's opportunities to create more tools. There's opportunities for, you know, we saw the roster of what Renard talked about, top opportunities within our facilities or our customers' facilities to take you know, use of these tools. But again, we also have to address the human factor of, you know, the change that's going to happen here. We've had a lot of conversation about the intellectual property. How are these models trained? Who owns the data? Where's that data coming from? How trustworthy is that data? There's been a number of works within the copyrights, within the government themselves. I know the U.S. government has gone through a number of information or exercises to do things around the copyright protection about what's generated from AI and what's copyrightable and what's not, and such. And the work that we talked about or heard yesterday from the C2PA, that's also going to be very vital to kind of authenticating and making sure we're tracking the sort of authenticity of the content that's there. And we've got to be, as a vendor, part of that conversation, making sure we're following along those aspects because, again, you know, our industry, content's king. We got to make sure we protect that and such. The other is how far. I mean, how far are we willing to push the envelope, right? The beauty of storytelling is it's very human nature. Humans want to be told stories, right? How far do you push the conversation? So where do we find where we draw the line as this is as far as we as an industry are going to go? You know, we're already seeing it, and we saw conversations about that yesterday as well. Deep fakes, AI personalities, it's all possible. I think Terry in his presentation, he talked about how overnight some radio stations are using AI synthesized voices to run those programs. Okay, where do we draw the line, right? So we have to be careful. And as an industry, again, not just from a end user, but also a vendor's perspective, we got to be very active in these conversations about the ethics, the standards, right? So the works that SMPTE is doing and such are very important that we're participating in that. So we make sure we as an industry are working forward with a clear, you know, sort of guideline and guardrails for this stuff. That's it.
Thanks.